Hi everyone, welcome to your assignment where you're primarily working on outlining your study phase and creating your data displays. You're creating all of the visuals that you will use and implement and incorporate into this section of your chapter 4, into the study phase section. I'm going to first talk a little bit about the outlines and the outline options and how to think about them and give you some tips. And then I'll move into your data displays. So there are 3 outlines provided for you here in this assignment, so make sure you take a look at each one of those. They're not presented in any order. Outline number 1 is not the best. Some of you might actually prefer, I'm thinking, like outline 2 or 3. They're all organized a little differently, so give yourself some time to think through or look at each outline and see which one kind of resonates with your thinking, resonates with how you might even present this to your audience or to your stakeholders. Use some of that to make a final decision as to which outline. Outline number 1, it's like this systematic outline that kind of incorporates everything, but a little bit more broadly. So you've got a lot more room to wiggle with in outline number 1, which 1 could be great. But 2 is going to ask you to, I shouldn't say 1 or 2. A could be great, or B, you have to be really organized within those sections. So it gives you a little bit more freedom, and it will get you through everything. Each one of these outlines will start with your analytical methods and procedures. Like, what did you do to analyze your data? Not just what are your findings, you will tell us that, but how did you analyze your data? What were the steps, the procedures that you did? And then, what were your findings? Outline number 2 kind of does the same thing. What did you do to analyze your data? What were the analytical methods that you used? But you present your findings. They're organized by inquiry question. So if you think back to the inquiry questions that you wrote and that you have in chapter 3, that could be the way that you organize your findings. Your findings should be answers to your inquiry questions. Remember, these inquiry questions are like research questions. So your findings should answer your research questions, even if it negates it, like even if there wasn't a change, like that's still a finding, right? But you can organize your study phase section by inquiry question. The third outline, again, you'll talk about your analytical methods, what you did, all of that's the same. But for your third outline, you'll organize it by measure. So the different measures that you had, you can organize your findings of each measure of analyzing the data that you collected for those measures, right? So that's another way you can organize this section. No one outline is going to be the best, but there should be, I hope that there's one that at least stands out to you, and then use that one. The last thing I'll say is each outline, they all end with the same, reflections on the study phase. So, pick an outline that you think will work for you and your thinking and your organization, and also what might make sense for your stakeholders or your organization. For your data displays, you'll see at the second part of this outline, this is an activity that we've done before. You did this with your do phase, right? You outlined your do phase. You saw the different ways I can organize this narrative. Same thing. We're going to deeply outline. But then you're also going to create your data displays, which means you need to analyze your data. Many of you it's highly likely that you have been analyzing your data over time because we've prompted you, you've had access to analytical resources. You might have needed to analyze that data as you collected it for what you were doing next. So I highly doubt that everyone is only analyzing your data in week 3. You've likely already done that. Now is the time to generate, draft, polish your data displays. These are going to be the tables, the graphs, the figures, things that you need to help show and demonstrate to your readers evidence of your findings. Remember, we want to do a good job of balancing showing and telling. You don't just want to tell people what your findings are. Maybe keen critical stakeholders will get a little curious of well, how do you know? Can you show us? Can you prove it? And so you have to do that. You have to not just tell them your findings, you also have to show them your findings. Now, it's really important, and you'll see you'll see throughout your chapter 4 guidebook too, that the goal is not for your audience to analyze your data. So don't just show them data for them to analyze and generate findings. You should be analyzing your data determining your findings, and then choosing data displays, tables, figures, visuals, right? That will help to communicate or provide evidence for those. So depending on the nature of your data, you might have a number of different types of data displays. You might have a Pareto chart or a run chart. You might have bar graphs. You might have line graphs. You might have like frequency charts of things. You might just have or like some sort of display of descriptive statistics and some sort of table. For qualitative data, you can display your code book, or here's some sample codes and here's some sample segments that I coded with those codes, something that also shows and demonstrates that. You can also create with like themes or like findings, you can also create visuals that represent how those findings connect or overlap or bump up against, or how they're related, like this one thing is implying or is influencing this other thing. So here's thing number one and there's an arrow to thing number two. Like think of what you would want to show up on a presentation screen to your stakeholders to describe some of your findings. That isn't just a paragraph of words, isn't just a paragraph of text. Like think of like how can you communicate these findings visually? So you're going to draft those. Well, I won't say the easiest. And a lot of my experiences with this work, it is often it's a much smoother workflow if you generate your data displays first, because you'll insert those into your chapter 4, into the study phase, and then you'll basically write up what that data display shows. And so you'll work from the visual to narrate for your audience or for your readers. So versus if you go the other way around, it's a lot harder and people end up revising their writing a ton, because then they actually create a visual that they need to go back and re-narrate, and it's too confusing. So we focus on visuals first, and then writing up about those visuals, pointing to those visuals, telling the audience what these visuals are displaying. That will be a lot of the bulk of some of your writing for the study section, the study phase section of your chapter 4. So take your time with this work. Good planning ahead of time is going to make your writing smoother. So you're thinking of like your future self next week. You're doing a lot of the generative work this week. And the more detailed your outline is, without it being like paragraphs, right? But like the more you cognitively like brain dump your stuff into your outline, when you come back next week and it's time to just write, then you've done all the generative work. Now you're just putting some pieces together in some sort of narrative or writing, right? So let these two things be separate. Let this week just be on outlining. Don't try to write up polished paragraphs. Save that for next week. You've got a work week next week to work on it. So parcel those two out, generating and then like a different form of generating before you edit. All right, good luck.